everybody. I hope I'm audible and visible. Now, if I could very quickly please just get a confirmation on the two things, we will begin with a very short, sweet, and a very, very important YT that we have for today. But of course, before we begin, I need a heads up. So if you could please just write to me in the chat box as to my audibility and visibility. Of course, I'm taking a moment to peep in the chat box. Sorry for, me gazing the other side. But it's only to be able to see in the chat box because we do have viewers. So अगर आप फट से लिख देंगे कि मैं दिख भी रही हूँ और सुनाई भी अच्छे से दे रहा है, then we will simply begin. Because as you can see, what we're going to be doing today is going to be very important and very crucial, because the best way to prepare for any examination is always by relying on the PYPs. The PYPs, aka the previous year papers. They give us the best insight as to how should the approach be, what are the kinds of things you need to understand, and it gives a very clear reflection of the mentality and the temperament of the examiner, so that we can also attune ourselves with all things that he wants from us, and not that what we think of how the examination needs to be. So again, okay, perfectly audible and visible, and I guess with that let us begin. Now, if you would have seen, reading comprehension is not only a crucial and an indispensable part of your paper, it's also the kind wherein the quality of the comprehension that we have is good. So it's not like those mediocre passages which you could just read and everything's going to be okay. Yes, the good part is that most of the questions are going to be specific detail. Specific detail ka matlab hota hai, it is going to be visible there and then. It's about how we read the passages. But the passages are not going to be very user friendly. They will have the kind of information which will be heavy. So by saying heavy, what I mean to say is that it's not going to be something which is going to be easily comprehensible, and to be able to enhance our understanding of the passages, one will have to be well read. You know for a fact that the reading comprehensions could be 2 or 3 in number depending on the kind of examination that you're giving. They just don't stop at 1. And for us to be able to rake our scores, so the beauty of a reading comprehension is lesser time, more questions. So while you would take say 5 minutes to be able to do 5 independent questions or maybe more, in a reading comprehension, you finish with the reading and solving of the questions in just about 5 minutes. So that is where the win-win actually comes in. So reading comprehensions are not something जो हम लोग हल्के में ले सकते हैं, and because हम लोग हल्के में नहीं ले सकते, आज एक बार let's just do an acquaintance with the reading comprehensions, what they have in store for us. Read the passage line by line, answer the questions. Now, while answering the questions, I will give you about 10 seconds of time to be able to read and write your option in the chat box, so that people who are solving it live can also punch in their answers just to see if you've gotten that right or not. The passages that we have for today have been taken from the previous year papers itself. So if you are scoring good here, you know you are already one step ahead or one step closer to what your dream college or your dream examination qualification is going to be all about. And I think with that, let us begin. So what we're going to be catering to today over here are going to be 2 real RCs with the questions, and of course understanding the answers, decoding every option, why an answer and why not. I know 2 is a very scant number, but understanding that we don't have a lot of time to ourselves, I think 2 can also be a very good start. So I've taken 1 from the IBPS paper and I've taken 1 from the SEBI paper. So this is how you can have the 2 passages to yourself. Beginning with, now the first passage. We have heard it all. Reduce and reuse, segregate, change your consumption. But nothing forces one to think about it as much as when a daily practice such as a waste collection is affected. So हम लोग ने सबने सुना है, there's always a ballyhoo about reduce करो, उसको reuse करो, segregate करो, change करो अपना consumption style, so on and so forth. But nobody has ever been forced to make a change unless there is a waste collection that is being actually affected. In order to make the groceries last longer and generate less waste in case collections is disrupted, we've been trying harder to plan each meal better and have no leftovers, but we're still generating more than we could. So for example, so that waste ना हो, बाद में कोई दिक्कत ना हो, तो हम planning भी अपनी grocery की ऐसे करते कि उतना ही ले, उतना ही पकाए और उतना ही खाए. But again, they're going about by saying, but we're still generating more than we could. Even after a carefully planned grocery run, there are too many plastic packets to put in the dry waste pan. If you see, कितना भी आप समझ लो, हमेशा plastic रहता है आपके फेंकने के लिए. And as we try frantically to fast track a switch from disposable to cloth diapers. For the 3-month-old infant in the house, the laundry load piles in a newly designated nappy bucket. And हमको लगता है कि अच्छा अभी 3 महीने का हो गया बच्चा, चलो अभी डायपर से अभी नैपीज पे आ जाते हैं ताकि और ज्यादा सस्टेनेबल हो जाए, बट उससे भी क्या होता है, फिर उससे एक नैपी बास्केट तैयार हो जाता है. COVID-19 has hit all of our lives in myriad and unexpected ways, ranging from the loss of jobs and incomes to merely battling boredom by doing WhatsApp puzzles. COVID-19 of course has hit us. It could be कि आप इतने बोर थे कि आप WhatsApp puzzles कर रहे थे, या of course आपके jobs, loss of income हुआ है. But it has certainly made many middle class think about things usually taken for granted, one of which is what we can do as end users for our consumption and waste generation. But the one thing that has really had people to think about has been कि यार middle class के लिए specifically कि हम लोग कैसे इस waste management को altogether approach करें. With overloaded recycling centers and lack of trucks, dry waste too is to be stored until collected, and tips circulate on how to manage this. Cutting plastic packets with food on 3 sides and washing and drying them, putting smaller paper pieces into bigger bags and securing them to reduce volume, scraping coconut shells clean. So there have been a lot of ways in which, because of course this paucity of truck, there is paucity of a proper management. So of course all of these are the ways in which they have told कि आप ऐसे और थोड़ा sustainable या थोड़ा और elongate उसको कर सकते हो. When we actually sat with the dry waste and carried out the process of cutting and washing, we were quite amazed at how a 2-week worth milk packet managed to shrink to the size of a cell phone. And when you actually do that, you'd be very stunned to know कि कैसे milk curdle होके बस size of a cell phone बचा अंदर. And when we replaced the wet waste dustbin with a much smaller container, it helped us to think twice each time we wanted to throw something. And एकदम से जब आपने उसका साइज कम किया तो आपको 2 बार सोचने में लगेगा कि यार फिर से फेंकना है क्या, करना है क्या उसको. People are also being urged to switch to green options for sanitary waste like reusable cloth pads or menstrual cups, as there is no clarity on when waste collection could get further disrupted. Even people who are going through their their periodic cycles, the monthly period cycles, have also been urged to be using menstrual cups. There is of course no reason to not uphold these practices year round. Many of us fail to do them simply because we have other options, and it's not that you can't do. I mean, right now people are doing it because they know कि यार अगला waste pickup कब होगा हमें पता नहीं है. So उस problem की वजह से या उस probably limitation की वजह से इस समय कर रहे हैं. But then क्लियरली यहाँ पे ये चीज लिखी है कि ये सब हम ऐसे भी कर सकते हैं, बट हम लोग नहीं करते. क्यों? क्योंकि हमारे पास ऑप्शंस अवेलेबल होते हैं. We must have tried several times to make the transition to sustainable sanitary products, but may have only managed it partially, but we've not really been able to make a breakthrough. Many of the storage bottles in the middle class kitchen are old pickle and jam bottles, but sometimes they resort to buying containers. A lot of times, I mean, even our mothers tend to reuse by putting in a jam bottle or maybe, a pickle bottle and then using it further. But then people do tend to change to containers. And then there is the inevitable Swiggy order on lazy days, bringing in too many containers, covers, cutleries, and napkins. And then the day when it's a Swiggy party, of course, there isn't much that can be done. The lockdown seems to have brought back some of the sustainable practices, if only to avoid unnecessary shopping trips. At least the lockdown has made us sane enough to be able to understand that how is it that we can just be getting into some sustainable practices. And in the process, make us realize that some changes are more possible than we expected. And it has also given us an insight that some changes are actually possible. It's not that you can't. Now, we don't quite have too much choice. But once this all passes, we will. So currently we don't have. But once, the pandemic is behind us, we will actually have a lot of choices. And hopefully we will still carry over some sustainability habits from these turbulent times. Turbulent over here are the COVIDs. So of course the passage urges and says that the author really hopes that we do take our lessons forward even after the turbulent times are over. So that is what the passage is about. It's about the fact that it's not that we can't get into sustainable practices. It's just that we don't because we're spoiled for options. We're spoiled for choices. But the author is really hoping that once the COVID is over and now that people have actually got a glimpse of what could actually happen, when there is no proper waste pickups that are happening. So one has to be mindful about the sustainable practices one is indulging into, right? So Teeth, these are the past year papers, my dear. So this is where it has been taken from. Now let's get on to the questions. And like I said, I am going to just slip aside for about 5 seconds so that you can see the screen, mark your answer, punch it in the chat box, and with that we will begin. Now, according to the author, when are we forced to think about the words reduce and reuse, segregate, etc.? Your options are in front of you. Please use the chat box to be able to give the answer. Let's go. Okay. So now simple question, specific detail है. When are we forced to think about these words reduce, reuse and segregate? First line of the passage में ही बात हुई थी. When there is a shortage of food? No. When we know that there is an impending pandemic. So when we are bored like during lockdowns? No. When we face difficulty with throwing the waste away? Definitely. When we want to be creative with scraps? Of course not. None of these. Again not. The correct answer becomes option 3. Reason being why? Because the moment I say when we face difficulty with throwing the waste away, that's when we want to think about how can we reduce, how can we reuse? Because one would not want to keep doing the same thing again and again. Okay, the next one. In the first paragraph, what are the things that we do to generate less weight? So what are the kind of things that we do for less waste generation? Let's see. Okay, so glad you're punching in the answers. Let's see over here. In the first paragraph, what are the things we do to generate less weight? Plan each meal in a better way. Yes, of course. Every time the meal is more meticulous, it is, so that there's no leftover. Our grocery, carefully plan grocery list so that there would be many plastic bags. Now, this is wrong because this should have been so that there would not be many. So clearly this can't be. A, of course, is a choice. Switch to more sustainable ways like switching the cloth diaper to disposable. I think it was the other way around. So this cannot be either. Both A and C can't be because C is wrong. All of the others also can't be the answer, which means the correct answer is going to be option 1. Gyaneshwari, I hope you understand our answer cannot be the second one. If you read it through, it says so that there would be many plastic. We don't want many plastic, we want lesser. Sustainable तो तभी होगा ना. तो ये देखो लोग ने कितने carefully और smartly not वाला word ही नहीं डाला. You get the point here? Let's try the next. Which of the following cannot be related? Is not a meaning of the phrase taken for granted. So it has to be which of the following is not going to be the meaning. So taken for granted basically means अगर आपने आपने समझ लिया कि हाँ यार उसने ये चीज तो बोली ही है तो एक बार देखिए assumed is a meaning because आपने assume कर लिया उसने बोला है. Hypotheticated also means the same because आपने hypothetically सोचा कि हाँ यार उसने तो ये चीज बोली ही है. Premises again the information, the territory, that's the opinion of the author. वो भी आपने सोचा, so yes, taken for granted can be. Presumed is nothing but of course an extension of assume. That also makes sense. So the one that cannot be is going to be apprehend. Apprehend means to catch someone, which is why the police apprehends the thief. It is to catch. So clearly fifth is going to be an answer because it is not the meaning nor is it the. So clearly it is going to be the requirement of our answer. Let's try the next. Why do most of us not uphold the sustainable practices year round? So why do we not do it? Now, whenever you're looking or whenever you're doing RCs, always remember, make a certain presumption of the option. सोचो क्या चाहिए आंसर में and then read the answers to find it out. Let's try the next one. Okay. So why do most of us not uphold the sustainable practices year round? Because we have other options? Yes. It's because we are spoiled for choices, what we just discussed, definitely. Because these practices will create new problems. Problems जैसी कोई बात नहीं हुई. In fact, it's going to lessen the problem. But it's just that we don't make a conscious choice over here. Because these practices are not worthy of our time. Well, no such mention in the passage. Because we could do it only partially. However, we try again, no such mention कि सिर्फ आधा ही हो पाता है, बाकी आधा नहीं हो पाता. None of these is not my answer because I do have an answer which is going to be option 1. Now, which of the following is correct according to the passage? So, which of the following is simply going to be true? True, false करके निकाल लो. Now, we think about the words reduce and reuse, segregate, change your consumption, etc. daily. No. We only use it whenever there is a pandemic upon us or whenever there is some sort of, some situation which is pushing us to think. Otherwise, तो हम लोग तो हमेशा generosity में रहते हैं waste के. So clearly this can't be the answer. There will be too many plastic packets to put into the wet waste bag, even if we carefully plan our grocery run. No, that's not what it is. If you are planning right, it's not going to happen. This can't be an answer. Sometimes even dry waste have to be stored for long due to the lack of trucks and overloaded recycling centers. Okay, all right. Now it says dry waste has to be. Think what it is. People are not being urged to switch to green options for sanitary wastes like reusable cloth, pad and menstrual cups, though there is an uncertainty about when the waste will be collected. So now when I say people are not being urged, clearly in the passage they were being urged. All can't be correct. So I think this is pretty easy and direct. We do have, oh no, we don't have the answers as yet. Guys, let's have the answers in the chat box, please. The correct answer becomes option 3. Okay. All right. And with that, let's get on to the next passage. Again, first things first, I will read the passage along with you, and then we'll do the same drill wherein you will try to solve the passages. 3 teenagers, 2 soldiers and a civilian were among the 50 million or more estimated casualties in the 1918 influenza A pandemic. However, unlike most people who were killed by the virus, the lungs of the 3 were saved, preserved in formalin for more than 100 years. So the lungs, of course, of these guys were saved. Now, according to a preprint uploaded in bioRxiv on May 14th, these organs are providing genetic clues to why the virus could take so many lives. The virus that took so many lives, the science reports. So now their lungs have actually been preserved because they're doing more research to be able to know ऐसा क्या है कि virus ने इतना सारा life लिया. The 1918 pandemic, a zoonotic disease thought to have jumped into people from birds. So zoonotic is aerial, bird से जो चीज आती है, thought to have jumped into people from birds, was one of the deadliest pandemic on record. So it was of course the deadliest, especially lethal where the second and the third waves of cases which occurred starting in the fall of that year. Especially lethal were the second and the third waves. It's likely that variants of the virus played a role in the differing damage caused by each wave. Of course, the variant of the virus becomes very important, just like we did it in the COVID also. Unfortunately, obtaining viral and RNA sequence for samples that old is technically fraught. Fraught means something which is very difficult. In fact, until recently, extracting RNA from century-old specimen would have been considered a fantasy. In fact, अभी तक में या until late, actually लोग सोचते कि ये तो fantasy है तो हो ही नहीं सकता. Hendrik Poinar, an ancient DNA scientist of McMaster University, who was not involved in the study, tells Science. So he was the one who gave this idea, dialogue to Science. Even obtaining samples is hard. Preprint co-author Michael Worobey, an evolutionary biologist at the University of Arizona, tells Science. And in fact, he says that even sampling is something which is pretty difficult. Still, the team was able to secure a total of 13 lung tissue samples from the people who died from 1900 to 1931 from specimens that were being housed in the Berlin Museum of the Medical History and the Pathology Collection of the Natural History Museum in Vienna. 3 of them, all from 1918, contained influenza RNA. But then successfully they could manage to do it, and they could, they could extract it from the specimens. That was, specimens are going to be people who are being used as subjects. So from the specimens who were stored there. While the RNA was highly fragmented, the team was able to reconstruct between 60 to 90% of the genomes of the viruses that killed the true soldier and the entire genome of the virus that killed the civilian. But somehow they were able to reconstruct entirely of the civilian, 60 to 90% of the army men. The new sequence from all of the first wave of the pandemic, and when compared to the previously described strains from later on in the pandemic, they hint at how the virus may have become deadlier. In fact, when they matched it, they understood कि यार ये तो और deadly होता जा रहा है. For example, the two partial genomes from the soldiers contain sequences that are more bird-like, report science, a sign that early versions of the virus may have had more difficulty infecting people. So earlier it was more bird-like. So it was something which became difficult for to be able to affect people. Most telling though was the whole genome. But then we got maximum idea, the most telling. So maximum unraveling हुई थी किससे? Whole genome से. In cell cultures, the complex from the first wave virus constructed RNA at roughly half the efficiency of the virus from the later wave. The fact that you can test in vitro the effects of an extinct strain has huge implication. Implication is a consequence in understanding evolution of virulence and possible countermeasures should we encounter another flu pandemic. But then they went about by saying that to be able to find out all of this was a huge accomplishment, especially to be able to ward off any other thing that's going to happen next. Poyner tells science. It's absolutely fantastic work, he adds. The researchers have made reviving RNA viruses from archival material an achievable goal. So then they go about complimenting, saying that what they've done is awesome work. They have been able to retrieve the RNAs from these archive. Archive means जो चीज बहुत पुरानी हो चुकी है, from these archival material. This entire passage has been taken from the opinion the scientist on 18th May 2021. So you see, it's a science and it's sort of a sociology based passage, but yes, it is the kind of idea which we is not the kind of idea which we read on daily basis. So see, being an avid reader actually becomes very important. Let's bounce at the questions to be able to see what part of the body of people who died during the 1918 influenza A pandemic was preserved. So what part of the body do you think was preserved, guys? Please write your answers in the chat box. Do we have an answer? Excellent. All right. So yes, it was going to be lungs because this was supposed to be the kind of influenza was specifically something that attacked the lungs. Heart, no. Blood, no. It was the RNA. It was never the DNA. All of the above also can't be the answer. So the correct answer becomes option A. Let's see the other. What were the thoughts about the spread of 1918 pandemic? So back in 1918, what was the thought that these people had? Please refer to the idea wherein it said that it was a zoonotic infection. So what do you think? What was the thought? It spread from people to animals? Of course not. It jumped two birds from people. Two birds? No, it's from birds to people, not the other way around. Some wild animals must have been responsible. We never spoke about the wild animals as out of scope. It was thought to have spread from birds to people. Yes. It was thought that the virus was created artificially. Of course not. ये तो हो ही नहीं सकता. Which means the correct answer is going to be option D. Very well. We did have D as the answer. अगला देखते हैं. What must be obtained from the virus to conduct the study? So what is the one thing that they need study करने के लिए? पूरे के पूरे किस चीज का रिकंस्ट्रक्शन हो रहा था? याद करो पैसेज में. Punch in your answers, please. Any answers? DNA उस पे तो बात ही नहीं हुई, प्रोटीन पे भी नहीं, RNA yes, evolutionary detail no, nor was this. So of course our answer was RNA. Okay, What percentage of the genome of the virus that killed the civilian was reconstructed by the scientists? तो टीम ने देखो उन्होंने बात किया था कि उन्होंने 2 मिलिट्री वालों का x% निकाला था और सिविलियन का x% निकाला था. क्वेश्चन सिविलियन पे है. सिविलियन का कितना निकाला था उन लोगों ने? How much was it for the civilian, guys? 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Please give me your answer. So we have D. No, it's not going to be D. Now, if you pay attention to the part wherein we spoke about the passage. Sorry, I went way too ahead in the passage. So if we just go back to the passage that we have, and we were reading around it, and if you remember the part wherein it spoke about, so I'm just going to change so that you know where I'm speaking. So here is where it is. While the RNA was highly, I think this is, the highlight is not visible. How about a green? Is the highlight visible now? Yes. It says while the RNA was highly fragmented, the team was able to reconstruct between 60 to 90% of the genomes of the virus that killed the 2 soldiers and the entire genome of the virus that killed the civilian. Civilian का entire निकल के आया. So now getting back to the question that I have, if I have to say civilian का कितना reconstructed था, our answer is going to be E, guys. It was 100%. Entire था उसमें. Let's see the next. To what was the polymerase complex from the whole genome compared to? तो किस चीज से उसको कंपैरिजन किया था? Now polymerase complex resurrected from a previously published virus strain. Yes, उसी को तो रिकंस्ट्रक्ट कर रहे थे बार बार. और किससे किया? पहले के पैंडेमिक से अभी के पैंडेमिक को किया पता करने के लिए what it was. So definitely A is right. Polymerase complex constructed from 3 people. No, it's not about the 3 people. Complex from the first wave virus. Now we want an entire thing which was resurrected. मतलब वो खत्म हो गया था उसको कैसे जैसे तो तोड़ ताड़ के उन लोगों ने वापस बनाया. So resurrection is a very important word. RNA of the people who died due to the influenza A pandemic, of course, not all of these. None of these again is not going to be an answer, which means the correct answer is going to be option A over here. And with that, we come to an end to the reading comprehensions. So if you see, they are heavy, like I said. They're not very easy peasy. They're not just, I mean, the answers are there. There's not a lot of inference or an implied meaning to itself. But yes, your thorough reading of the passage matters. Because the more thoroughly you read, the better your answers are going to be spread out in front of you. So be careful, read properly so that you're not missing on any of the nuance. I hope you all had a fun time solving the passages live with me, understood all of the questions, the options, why an answer and why not. I will see you guys next Monday once again with, of course, more such stuff. But until then, please make sure you're practicing the comprehensions because अगर 2 से 3 comprehension पूछ रहे 5 से 6 question है तो काफी dedication है. And if you want to qualify the examination, you know every mark counts. Thank you so much for giving me your valuable time. If you like the video, you know what to do. Please hit the like button. Share it with other like-minded friends who are also preparing for the examination and might want some direction. And I'm going to see you guys next Monday once again. Thank you, everybody. Please have a great week.